My Lords, in rising to follow my noble friend Lord Altrincham and his maiden speech, may I start by saying, if I'm permitted to, that it is, I think, the first time since I came into your Lordship's house a year ago that a maiden speech has been delivered and that members of the family have personally been present to hear it. And I take that as a very encouraging sign for our return to normality and a sign of great confidence. And I thought it was worth just mentioning. There is another first going on at the moment. This is, as my noble friend has explained, the first time since 1963 that an Altrincham has sat in your Lordship's house. 1963 was something of a vintage year for departures from your Lordship's house, and I note that there is another peer returning at the moment who also left and has been absent since 1963, though on the opposite benches. So who knows what fruit might yet be harvested from that vintage year. My noble friend is a banker. It's very brave nowadays to say that you're a banker, and he brings the courage to confess that he has spent most of his life as a banker, as an investment banker. He has been advising governments and major companies, and he has gone on to set up, since then, his own corporate finance firm. But unlike some bankers, and in the context of this bill, I think everyone will know what I mean, his reputation for integrity in the course of his career has not only emerged intact, but has in fact been enhanced. But he is more than simply a banker, and as he said, he has a keen interest in mental health issues arising from his own family's experience. And his wife's books, Rachel's books, have brought consolation to countless readers suffering from depression. And indeed, quite a lot of joy to people not suffering from depression. They're rather good books and rather useful books in their own right, I found. My noble friend will be using his time, part of his time in your Lordship's house, to promote interest in and support for mental health problems. I'm confident that with his great gifts and his broad sympathies, he will make a wonderful contribution to your Lordship's house. Turning briefly to the matter of the bill, we have come today to bury LIBOR. Not many people know, perhaps, there's no reason why they should, but I spent a number of years lecturing on financial services and capital markets, and LIBOR was the meat and drink of what I did. I rather feel LIBOR is something of an old friend. Now, I have listened and learnt a great deal to speakers in this debate so far about the very fine technical points that are at issue and that are being dealt in this bill. But I would feel bereft if an old friend like LIBOR were to be buried without somebody like myself at least reminiscing in a mournful and doleful tone about his departure. He will be greatly missed, my old friend. As my noble friend the Minister said in his letter circulated before the debate, this is the only critical benchmark left that is generated in London. That is, the loss of that is a harm to the prestige of London as a financial centre. And it also raises a very small question mark about the robustness of the robust connection with the legal profession and the documentation of financial services transactions, which is one of the boasts of London as a financial centre, that the documentation is done under English law. Part of that, just part of it, was that connection with LIBOR, and that is gone. I do not think we are advancing when we see the City of London, not just the financial side, but the associated legal side, losing the only benchmark that is generated in London. Who killed my old friend LIBOR? Well, a certain number of people had suffered criminal convictions, and that's part of the answer. But of course there was also a suggestion made at the time that the Bank of England was reasonably aware of what was going on. Now that suggestion I know I'm straying a little bit into the history of the bill, but the history of the matter. That suggestion was, of course, robustly denied by the Bank of England, but what was happening in 2008 and thereabouts was that the bank was trying to drive interest rates down for monetary management reasons, while a very uncertain market, faced with a great deal of risk, was trying to put interest rates up. And there was, to some extent, LIBOR was the victim crushed between these two forces. Of course, I have no reason to doubt the Bank of England's denial of this allegation, but I'm sure that in the course of time more will be learnt. I don't know if I'll be alive when it is. Could my old friend LIBOR nonetheless have been resuscitated? Well, I think, in fact, he could. I think if our regulators had had more confidence and less fear, if they had not had removed from them at the time their earlier obligation to maintain the competitiveness of the City of London as a financial centre, then I think with imagination something could have been done to retain a London-based benchmark. Of course, it's all too late for that. We are here simply to invite in the undertakers, and there is no going back. But I do hope that my noble friend and the government will learn one lesson at least from this, and that is that if we are to have a successful, and I hope we will have, a successful and indeed internationally dominant financial services sector in this country, with the benefit that flows from that to other professional services like law and accountancy and so forth, if we are, then we need to have a clear framework for regulators which directs them to supporting that competitiveness and encouraging the success of the City of London. Regulation is not all about risk minimisation. After all, my lords, if one were to minimise risk utterly, there would be no banking. It is a risk business by definition.